Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk to you about The Chalk Man by C.J. Tudor. So funny story, I was given an advanced reading copy of The Chalk Man by Penguin. Then a bit later, Book of the Month's December selections were revealed. And I saw The Chalk Man there and I'm like, where have I seen that book? I have seen this cover. Where have I seen this? And I racked my brain and I thought, did I already buy this from somewhere? I never remembered. I never saw any evidence that I owned it. And so this was my selection for Book of the Month because I typically go with thrillers or, you know, the most terrifying read I'm going to get out of Book of the Month is usually where I land. So it arrived. And then I thought, okay, well, I was going through my arcs very systematically, reading them all before their release date. When I opened up the Penguin website again to see what my obligations were, what the deadlines were for the reads that I had from Penguin, I was like, well, that's where I saw the book. This is my review for the advanced reader's copy of The Chalk Man that I received. However, I read it after I had chosen it for my Book of the Month, so I read this physical copy. The book is being released, officially released, on January 9th. It is a pretty good book. I'm not gonna lie. It's pretty good. So the story is about a group of friends in 1986. The character we most care about is named Eddie. He's a 12-year-old boy. And he's kind of got this gang in a very Stand By Me kind of way, if you've ever seen that movie with River Phoenix and Jerry O'Connell, and I'm aging myself. And so they live in this really small town, but a new teacher arrives in town and basically tells Eddie about how he and his friends used to take chalk and leave symbols for one another. It was almost a language that they made up entirely on their own. And so Eddie takes that idea back to his group of friends, and they do develop these symbols and meanings that they can leave outside the homes of each other. They each have their own color chalk, and the chalk game is invented. What we actually delve into the most is 12-year-old Eddie in 1986. However, the story does alternate between 12-year-old Eddie and 32-year-old Eddie in 2016. What we eventually learn is that the group of 12-year-olds, through their Chalkman game or their chalk symbols game, end up discovering the dead body of a girl. 20 years later, Eddie's still in the same town, but you know how people grow apart. He doesn't really keep in touch with a lot of the friends that he had. But he does receive a letter with a random chalk stick figure drawn. For the whole book, there's mystery surrounding what happened back in 1986 and why is it resurfacing in 2016. It's a very familiar structure if you read thrillers ever, where you're dealing with the past and you're dealing with the present, and clues are slowly revealed over time within both narratives, and you're not going to have it pieced together, or you shouldn't have it pieced together until the very end. I can't say that I pieced it together before the very end. I didn't. But at the same time, you know, there are books that I read that I try to outsmart, where as soon as I start reading them, like, I try to figure out what's going on. Certain books lend themselves really well to that, and it becomes a competitive game in my mind, me against the author. The difference with Chalkman is that I didn't want to. I didn't want to figure it out. I wanted to just read it. To me, that's an indication of how well it was written. Not only do I not figure it out ahead of time, but I really don't try to, because I'm too involved in the characters' lives and who they are as people, because in this book, that is almost more important than what's happening. I can't even express to you, like, Eddie as a character was written so convincingly that I assumed that C.J. Tudor was a man. CJ Tudor had been a 12-year-old boy and knew all about 12-year-old boyness. That's how convinced I was. When I found out that CJ Tudor was in fact a female, I was really taken aback. Maybe it's not just Eddie. I mean, Eddie was a brilliant character, but most of his friends were guys. Eddie's father was almost more lifelike than his mother. You know, the conflicts in the book are between men. Shame on me for having any sort of assumption. That's terrible of me. But that's, again, an indication of how well this book was written. I love thrillers or horror novels that have the perspective of a child. I think that they're scarier because they speak to the reader's inner child. Typically, you're a little more frightened of things as a child. Child narrators tend to be a little bit more believable, so when there's something upsetting or scary to a child, we tend to take it more seriously. I don't know. I'm interested in these theories that are bouncing around in my head. But Eddie's youth in this book, I think, is probably the key to this book being as successful for me as it is. This book is incredibly uncomfortable. It was so uncomfortable just because it was so visceral and real. I read really graphic and really disturbing stuff sometimes that doesn't affect me as much as the imagery and the description of events in this book, and it was just really uncomfortable. So basically it winds up being a really good book that I didn't enjoy, if that makes any sense, which you don't have to enjoy a book for it to be really good, and I acknowledge how good this book is. It just wasn't fun. It just wasn't a fun time for me. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Like, that should not deter anybody from reading this book. Not all books are fun. You know, not all books take you to a happy place. Some books take you to a really awful place. And it's still important that you follow the book there to that place. This book has some very serious themes that you should know going in, but they're not trite. You know, they're very relevant and serious thematic elements to this book that are not often the subject matter of thrillers. Obviously in thrillers, you get the murder, you get the mystery, you get the vengeance, or you get the deception and all of those things. But I mean, this book takes a hard look at things like religion and things like prejudice and things like bullying and things like, you know, the darkness within children, and weaves that all together in a really successful way. And so just to wrap everything up, I will say that The Chalkman might not be the most entertaining read, but I think that The Chalkman is a very good book, and I think that if you are a serious psychological thriller reader, mystery reader, crime fiction reader, even a horror reader, then I think that having the experience of this book would be a good idea. I think that you will walk away from it very glad that you read it, if that makes any sense. If you look at books the way that I look at books, I mean, by all means, if you just like entertainment, then forget everything I just said. That's all that I have. If you've read The Chalkman, perhaps you picked it as your book of the month as well. Let me know your thoughts and opinions. If you're interested in knowing anything else about the book, I will leave that all linked down below as usual. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all very soon.